Welcome to our Workflow Wednesday for October. You're glad you're here, and today our topic is going to be vectorization. But before we get to that, just so you know, you guys, if you have questions or comments, you can put them into the chat or you can put them in the comments down below. I'll be here for about 45 minutes after the presentation just to make sure that you guys have a chance to ask any questions or about this topic or about Flexi in general. Go ahead and throw those down there. We'll be happy and glad to answer those for you. So vectorization, this is nothing new in Flexi 21, but it's something that we get a lot of questions about in our tech support, or we want to have them do demos, or anytime we're in a place where we're at a show or something like that, vectorization always comes up. And so there's a few new things that we would like to, or some new different techniques and things that we'd like to use. And so I want to show you what I do when I go through this process and kind of some of the tips and tricks for each tool and kind of what they're about and what they're for. So let's jump right in and we'll talk about the different tools and kind of what vectorization is and how to best utilize it. So let's share our screen and jump into Flexi. Okay, so what we got here is a plain old artboard here, and we're going to import a couple different files. While I do that, let's just talk about what vectorization is. Vectorization is essentially taking a bitmap and converting it from its current bitmap form into vector artwork. And so that is the basics of vectorization. So, you know, why would you want to convert a bitmap into a vector? Well, for example, if we take a look at this image right here, this is a bitmap. And if we look at the properties, and we know it's a bitmap because in Design Central, it shows us these two tabs. And we look at the DPI or the pixels per inch, and it's 150 by 150. So not super good, not terrible, but you know, and then the size is not great either. We just don't have a lot of data here. And then as we scroll in and zoom in, everything seems okay. But as I get closer, look at how pixelated this is. This is pretty bad. So this image here needs correcting. So if we were to take this image, for example, and we were to, and again, this is 3 by 3 inches. If we were to take this and blow this thing up at, say, 40 by 30, we're hardly even zoomed in at this point, and look at how terrible it looks. So this image is unusable in terms of anything larger than what it currently is. And in fact, even at this size, it's probably not that great of an image to be using. So vectorization allows us to take these objects and convert them into vector lines and objects so that we can scale them infinitely without losing any quality. So this is helpful for logos and all kinds of different things. So here's two good examples, a color image and a black and white that are, again, somewhat pixelated, but we're going to fix that with our vectorization process. Now, this is also a bitmap, but why is this bitmap not good for vectorizing? Well, the way that vectorizers work is that they determine the different colors that are in the file and they draw lines based on contrast. So if we take a look at, for example, here, we see a very clear contrast between the tan and the light tan, or the brown and light tan. And so the software is very clearly able to draw lines here. Same here with the red, is the software is going to be able to very easily distinguish the line between the two colors when it goes to vectorize. Same here, obviously black and white, it knows the difference between there because of the contrast. Take this image, for example, or any image of like a person or landscape or anything like that. It's going to be very difficult to vectorize this. For one thing, as you zoom in, this is what we call noise. There's a lot of noise in here. And what's going to happen is the software is going to see some of these colors and not know where the clear boundary is. And in fact, as we move down here, let's say into the pants area here, see how the color is the same color. The pants are all the same color, but because of the shadows, there's darker spots. So what the software is going to want to do is it might capture a bunch of these pixels in a group, and then it might capture some of these pixels in a group, and then some of these pixels in a group, and then these in a group. So it's not going to be able to define these lines very clearly. So an image like this, where there's a lot of colors, like grouped together, there's a lot of noise, it's really not going to be able to do that. And so this image, if you wanted to, you could probably posterize this image, which is basically the process of merging colors together and then create a simpler image to then vectorize it. Again, that's probably not going to be a really great solution. So this is not a good image to vectorize. Something like this would be, we would say, let's not vectorize that. So let's go back to these two images then. So if these are the kinds of images, we like this image because it's obviously got, lines that are clearly delineated. We don't have any gradients or anything inside. The shapes are all one color. So these two images are really good for that. Now, you might have a little more complicated images with more colors, and that's okay. But in this circumstance, we're just looking at these two, and these look pretty good for us. So let's just quickly go over then. Now that we know, okay, what images are good, which ones are not, let's take a look at what the available tools are for us. So if we go to Bitmap, go to Vectorize, we have Auto Trace, Centerline, Color, and Picture Cut, Bezier, Enhanced Curves, Enhanced Corners, Centerline, Color. There's a lot of options here. So how do we tell which ones to use? Well, first of all, let's just start by doing a brief overview of what some of them do. Currently, we're going to ignore Centerline and Picture Cut. These are kind of two special effects that we're probably not going to use at the current moment. Picture Cut does a kind of a unique effect, picture cut effect, and then Centerline Trace just draws a line down the center versus on the outside. So there are some circumstances where you'll probably want to use that, but not always. For our cases, we're going to use Auto Trace, which is going to be for black and white images, and Color Trace for color images. So let's use the Auto Trace first. Actually, before we do that, Bezier, Enhanced Curves, and Enhanced Corners and Centerline, these are all going to be really useful for black and white images. So really, if you have a color image, the one that's going to be the best for you is going to be the Color Trace. If you want to use one of these on a colored image, what you might want to do is convert the color image either to grayscale or to black and white. That might actually be a really good thing to do. And you can do that in a photo program. You can convert all the colors to black and white and then bring them in. And that might actually, and that would give you the ability to use in these options. Again, if colors are important for you to keep, then you want to use Color Trace and preserve those colors. Bezier allows you to instead of using the Auto Trace, it's kind of got its own algorithm for tracing around lines. And then the Bezier option uses the Bezier tool to create it. So what ends up happening with the Bezier tool is you typically get rounder, smoother corners, things like that. You can still get sharper corners, but it's kind of a more smooth tool. So just be aware of that. Enhanced Curves is essentially a step up from Bezier, but it has a very balanced set of settings associated with it to kind of give you the best possible. Very similar to Auto Trace. And then Enhanced Corners has the three little dots after that. When I click on this one, it's going to give me some additional options that I'm allowed to modify. So it's the same as this one and this one, except for now I have the ability to modify how this works. Centerline and Color. This is the color option allows you to posterize bitmaps if you want to. We won't go into that right now. And then Centerline is just the Bezier version of Centerline Trace. So kind of explore with that one just a little bit. So let's start with auto trace. So I'm going to hit auto trace, and over in Design Central, I'm going to see all my settings here. So I've got noise reduction. Noise reduction is reducing the noise that's in the file. So if you have a file that has a blurry edge, that's not a good transition from, like in these files here, we have a really good transition between the colors. There's not any blurry pixels. Let's go back in here. Let's exit the tool, and I'll kind of show you. Let's go back to this file just because I want to show you what that looks like. So, for example, if we zoom in here to the very edge of her hand here, this is what they're talking about when it comes to noise. There's a lot of pixels as we transition from this color to white. And then even in the white, there's a lot of muddy colors in here. This is noise. So what it'll do is it'll try and reduce the amount of noise around the edges so that it can find that better. So you can do more, less, several different options when it comes to your noise settings. So if I click here, auto trace, I can choose how much noise reduction. In this particular case, I really don't have any noise in this file, so I really don't need to have noise filtering, but I could add some if I needed to. So we got less, normal, more, and most. Corners, this is going to be, how it decides whether it's more sharp, more processing. So sharper corners would be most, and less sharper corners would be less. By default, it's set right at the middle to normal, which is usually a pretty good balance so that it doesn't sharpen round corners and round off sharp corners. I typically always set the resolution to full because I want it at full size. And then the tolerance, this is an interesting setting. This is basically permission is what I like to call it. Instead of tolerance, I like to say permission. You're giving it, the more tolerance you give it, the more permission you're giving the software to make changes to the flow or the shape of the object as it goes along. So for example, it's going to have more permission to deal with little down bumps like this. So it's going to not follow this quite so tightly, and it'll just draw a line straight over that. If I get my tolerance too low, then that means that it's going to try and follow this as close as it possibly can. So I'm going to end up with a vectorization that's exactly the same as the image, which I don't particularly want. I want these lines to be smoother. And that's kind of the whole idea. So tolerance, this can help though, adjusting this back and forth based on your noise or what the results are. Sometimes you can play with that. And like I said, you can add 5, 10, 15% and see if that makes a difference and gives you a better result depending on the image that you're working with. So then we can choose the color that you want it to produce once it's done. And then we have, what kind of corners do you want it to use, sharp or rounded? And then do you want to reverse the image? So then in this case, all I have to do is drag and highlight over this area. It's going to automatically vectorize for me. I don't need to do anything additional. So after I've dragged my box, I'm going to hit Exit Tool, and I need to get the bitmap out of the way. So I'm going to click somewhere here in the white space, but where it's still inside the bitmap so that I can select it. I'm going to drag it over here. And so here is our result. So now we've got a nice vectorized file, and this has done a really good job of smoothing out these areas here. You can see down in here, and it's done a pretty decent job of vectorizing this. Now, this is kind of an ideal situation here, but this is a pretty good job. Now I can scale this infinitely, and I don't ever lose any quality. I don't get more pixelated or less pixelated. So that's a really nice thing. So as we move on, let's take a quick look at the color trace. And we're going to go into some more examples of some black and white ones here in a minute, but I want to kind of just go over the two ones briefly. So bitmap, we're going to go to vectorize and then color trace. The key here is we need to find out how many colors that we have in the file. So in this particular case, I don't feel like counting these colors, so I'm going to go ahead and just drag and select. Now, by default, it automatically went to 6, and that's just because that was the last one used. But if I didn't know, I could put it up to 16. And in this case, there's only 6 colors. So it really is not going to let me go any more than 6. But I could go less. I could go 5. And what it'll do is it'll slowly start to remove all the colors. So if the colors really aren't that important to you, you could reduce it down to that number, or you can increase it depending on what you want. I want all the colors, so I'm going to set it to 6. And then I can decide whether I want to change the colors of this logo later or not. So I'm going to hit 6, and then I'm going to hit apply. Again, I'm going to exit my tool, and I'm going to grab that bitmap and move it out of the way. And now I've got my logo here. And now I can take each individual piece here, and I can change colors. I can do whatever I want with these. I can resize them if I want to, make them bigger. I can make any kind of adjustments I need. I can also scale the entire thing, and I don't lose any quality. If we zoom in and we look at these edges, now they're really nice and clean. You're never going to see an issue here. Now, one thing to remember about vectorization is vectorization is not going to be perfect all the time. And so that's kind of one of those, sometimes can be the pitfall of some people using the vectorization. They're expecting it to be absolutely perfect. Now, if we look at this file, there's some inherent problems with what happened to it. So if we look at this one, for example, here, this little one comes down to a tip, and so does this one, but this one kind of has this weird little flat spot right here. So when it processed this, it kind of gave us a weird little angle here. And so, we're going to have to come in and make some adjustments. Here in this one, it was just so pixelated that it just cut it off flat. So when we look at vectorization, we can always say, yes, we're probably going to need to have to come back in here and make some adjustments. So I can come in, for example, here. If I want this corner to be sharp, I can go to my sharpen corners in my tool here, make that adjustment, hit apply. Just like that, now I've got a sharp tip on that one. So there'll be some times when you need to make some adjustments to a file after, but the good thing is you're 90% of the way there. And when it comes to logos and things like that, that's can be half the battle. So let's jump into another example here. I'm going to import a bitmap. And here is just this is actually probably going to be your best case scenario that you'll ever find in a logo. This logo is fairly clean, and it's very high resolution. It's 5,000 by 4,000, 57 megabytes. There's a lot of data in here. And so this is really good for us. And if we zoom in, though, you can see a slightly different problem that this file has. Remember I talked about that noise? This file has quite a bit of noise at the edges, unlike our other one that was very clean and sharp. This one has a lot of blurriness going on here that can mess up the vectorizer. But fortunately, we have a noise setting, so we can take care of that. So let's go ahead and take this image. I'm actually going to crop it down just because it doesn't need to be this big. This has nothing to do with the vectorization process, really. It just has to do with me not wanting to have to deal with a very large file. So there we go. A little bit smaller, a little bit easier to manage and deal with. Get rid of that one. So now I'm going to go to my colors here. And in this case, I'm going to say, how many colors do I have? I've got white, green, orange, and gray. So I've got 4 colors. I'm going to bitmap, vectorize. I'm going to hit color trace. I'm going to highlight my area. And now here's the thing about this file. See, it left it at 6 because that was the last setting that I used. But if I hit it 16 colors, look at all these colors that it's found. And those are all part of, that's all part of the pixelization or that blurriness that's happening, that noise that's happening. So this particular case, the edge filter by default is set to more. And that's okay. I'm going to leave it there because I need more of that edge filter than I normally would. So in this case, I don't need all 16 colors because if we were to try and vectorize this with 16 colors, it would actually try and separate the noise and create different little artifacts. We don't want that. So we're just going to say, hey, the 4 main colors that I'm really concerned about are here. So if I hit 4, reduce it down to 4. Now here's what you'll zoom in here and look what the software's done. It's removed all the noise. And now it's created a line that's kind of pixelated like we had in that other file. That's great. No problems there. This is going to make it easier for the software to do that. So hit apply, exit, right click, exit tool. I'm going to go ahead and move the bitmap out of the way. And in this case, now I've got my vectorized lines. And you can kind of see here, if I zoom in, look how nice and smooth these lines are. It went ahead and smoothed right over these. So you'll find that color trace does a really good job. Now, in this particular case, it did a very excellent job because of the high resolution of the image. Anytime you're doing vectorization, one of the tips would be is to make sure that you get the best image that you possibly can. Get the highest resolution image of whatever logo you're trying to vectorize or whatever piece of clip art or whatever it is you're trying to vectorize, get the highest resolution. This will help you and make your life so much easier. The lower the resolution, the more difficult it becomes. And in fact, why don't we go ahead and take a look at a low res or problematic file now. Let's go to this blurry house logo. So what I did was, this is the original logo here. It's black and white, and it's pretty high resolution. It's actually vector file, so it's perfect the way it is. This is what the original is supposed to look like. Original is designed with. I went ahead and rasterized it with a super low resolution to kind of give us some problems here. So you can see this is a pretty gnarly file, and it's got some issues. So again, we can select this and we can go into, let's use our Bezier option here this time. So Bezier, now if we zoom in on this, you'll kind of see what the Bezier has done. It's kind of rounded off some of the corners and it's created a little more of a rounded style here. So in this particular case, I would say the Bezier is probably not going to be the best option in here. So we're going to go ahead and hit undo. So if we move this out of the way, and we look at this, yeah, this is pretty terrible. And again, that's just because the Bezier is going to be a smoother type option. So depending if you're in a logo like this where there's a lot of sharp lines, typically these options down here, which are all Bezier based, are not going to usually be the best option. But we can get a little bit better. So that's not to say that we can't use them. Let's go to vectorize. Let's use enhanced corners. And the reason why I want to use this one is because I want to show you this option right here. So this is the option where I can choose how much permission or tolerance I'm allowing in each one of these scenarios. So the farther left I go, the more true it's going to be to the original design. So it's going to try and follow these little notches. The farther right I go, the more it's going to try and cover up those. So in this case, maybe slightly above average. Then here, noise suppression. Again, this is noise. So we don't have a lot of noise in this file. So I'm going to leave it right in the middle, and that should be fine. Maybe leave it at 50, right? And then my corner detection. So corner detection is going to look at these different areas and find out where there's supposed to be a corner. So maybe put this a little bit higher because I got a lot of areas that need corners. And hit OK. So as you can see, just with those few little changes that I made to those sliders, look at how much better this is compared to just the Bezier option that we just did. Our corners are much better on our squares here. We've got a little bit rounded here, but no big deal. We've got some little corners to deal with here. They're slightly rounded, but honestly, this is a logo that we can deal with. And we also got a little bit of an issue right here. And then finally, why don't we go ahead and just use the base auto trace function and just kind of compare. So when we look at the auto trace function, the auto trace function is actually pretty well tuned for black and white images. It does a really good job. And in fact, because it's not Bezier based, it doesn't try and do these rounded corners. So you can see here that you actually got a much better result down here in these corners because it's much truer to the lines than the Bezier. The Bezier is a little more of a flowing, so it worked really well with, or would work really well on this image here that we had imported earlier. So this leaf image, this would actually be a really good image to use on the Bezier because it has a lot of curves and a lot of flowing lines. Not that the auto trace wouldn't do well as well, but just something to consider. If you want Bezier lines to be able to edit afterwards, use the Bezier. But note that the difference are there. So there was a huge difference, though, between Bezier and then the enhanced corners where we edited some of those things. We could probably add a little more sharpness to it, and it would maybe fix up some of these a little bit easier. Or we could just use this one and kind of get some similar results. Again, we just have to make a few edits here. The good thing is this has gotten us 95% of the way. Whether we go with this one up here or this bottom one, we're really in a good spot. We don't have to try and recreate this entire thing. So let's just go with this one up above here because it honestly just has more issues. What can we do with this? This is really easy. So, this is where we come into this file and we say, all right, what are our goals here? We've gotten 95% of the way. I'm pretty happy with this. I can now take 5 or 10 minutes, not even that maybe, and start cleaning up some of these problems. So for example, I'm going to hit sharpen corner over here. I'm going to come up down here, click here, just like that. I've got a sharp corner, click here, hit enter, sharp corner, and I can keep doing this. See that we've got one right here. This is a fairly sharp corner, but enter. Now it's still kind of slanted. So what I might do is come into, and I'm going to bring out my flyout menu here so I can get to these tools easily. I can grab this tool, just say, you know what? I think we need to straighten this line out just a little bit, just like that. Now we've got a correction there. We can also come in here and say, let's just grab a guideline real quick and place it right in the middle. Say, okay, we've got some misalignment problems. So let's grab our point editing tool and let's kind of zoom in here and maybe adjust this over. We pull that up to the guideline, and then we can pull this one up to the guideline. Whoops, don't want to grab them all, just that one particular point. We can keep that like that. Boom, just like that. Now we've kind of fixed that problem. We can get rid of this guideline now. We fixed that. Now we can come over here. Again, we can use other tools like, for example, we can straighten this out a little bit if we want to. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually use my corners tool again. And I'm going to say, let's go from here, out here, to here, and kind of maybe adjust that, right there. Looks good. Hit enter. And again, I can always come through here and make some adjustments to these. I'm just getting some rough lines in place. Just like that. Now I can come back in here and say, okay, this line here is clearly out of line. We need to get that one straighter. You know, we can do several things. I can highlight multiple lines together and move them if I need to, like this, kind of straighten some things out. And then just in a few minutes, I can have all the little tiny issues that this file had ironed out really easily. So instead of having to redraw this whole thing, I got 95% of the way there, made some small adjustments, and now I'm good to go. So this is a really good thing to know, is that as you work with these tools, know that it's going to be a good idea to become familiar with the path editing tools so that you can do some adjustments like that if you need to. Let's look at one more file here. This is going to be a color logo with some text. Now, one of the things here that we'll notice is that we'll suggest is that when it comes to logos like this that have text, in the past, we might have suggested that you tweak and tweak and tweak and tweak until you can get the text just right. But now Flexi has the Find My Font tool, which allows you to, you could load this image right into Find My Font, figure out what the two fonts that they're using, and then just be done with it. Just retype the text, super easy. So that's one of the newer things you can use is just avoid having to deal with text, take it into Find My Font, figure out what text it is, and just do this. Just retype it up, no big deal. Really easy to do. Takes you probably 2 or 3 minutes to find out what the logos are, get the font, and then type it up. So we're going to use the color trace again on this one, since this is a color image. Again, I'm going to take a look at my colors here. So I've got a light blue, light gray, darker gray, black, blue, light blue. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 colors with white. So let's go with 7 or 8. So I'm going to highlight this color trace. All right, and we used 4 last time, so let's go with 6. Oh, it looks like we're still missing some of our gray. So let's hit 7, and there our gray lines just popped in. So I think we're good with this color. We could go with more, I think. If we go 8, yeah, there's more, but I don't know that that really helps us any. So I don't see any of our file missing when we go from 8 to 7. So we're going to go 7 and hit apply. Now this one it's going to mess up the insides of the O's. This can happen with text depending on the way that works. So just be aware of that. But I'm not too concerned about it at this point because we're going to get this out of the way. And I'm going to use Find My Font to do this. So I can just delete this and then insert it back in later. Now this file here looks pretty good. I've got all my colors. I've got all my pieces here, which is really good. I actually don't think I have to make too many, if any, adjustments at all. Looks like all the edges are pretty clean. Maybe some adjustments here. This looks kind of like looks like it needs to be straightened out. But overall, it doesn't look too bad. Looks like I got a little issue here that maybe I can correct. And then looks like right here, this one kind of has got an issue here. So what I might have to do is just make some small corrections here with this file or these little windows. I probably just do it once and then just copy and paste it over all the other ones. So I don't have to keep redoing the same work. But just like that, now I've got an image that is vectorized, a logo that's vectorized, that puts me in a really good position now where I can spend much less time trying to fix this than I would recreating it or anything like that. I'm not probably the best person when it comes to graphic design in terms of creating and using these tools to create this. I can make this, but it'll take me a lot longer. So if I can get a general shape started and then go ahead and modify it, I'm much better at that. In fact, that's I would say probably in general, that's just an easier way to have it. And so if you can, do a lot of the work for you, get that vectorization, even if it's much rougher than this, even in a case where, let's go back to our other file here. Let's move these out of the way. Let's just take a really blurry image here and let's do we did the Bezier here and it kind of turned out pretty bad. Even if I had to deal with something like this, I would much rather deal with this than I would dealing with something else or having to recreate this from scratch. I can use my point editing tools and clean this up super fast, much easier. You can come in here and get really good at using some of these point editing tools just to fix some of these issues. And it's not even a big deal at all. So we can kind of come in here and I can just show you how, quickly this can be done. Okay, and then we can grab this point here, straighten that out. I would like to straighten this line out. So we're going to go from here to here. Straighten that out. We've got one corner done. Come over here. And actually, I'm going to choose the straighten line because I want to go from here to here. And then what I'm going to do is grab my point tool. Oh, we got a few extra points down here. Okay, so let's take let's grab this point right there and let's remove it. We got an extra point there that we don't need. We'll zoom out. Oh, I'm grabbing the handle. I don't want the handle. I just want just the point. Zoom in here just a little bit so I can grab that. There we go. Flatten that out a little bit. And I could probably keep doing some work on there, but let's move to a different corner here. And if I zoom in, I can always adjust these back and forth. That gives me a pretty straight corner. Click here, enter. So I'm handling these pretty quickly. And I can get to some spots here that are pretty bad, like here, for example. This is a pretty nasty spot here, but just like that, I can create a general shape of what I want or how I would expect it to work. Something like that. And then from there, see from here, now I can just, make some changes. Like again, we want to do a sharp corner, and then I can do straighten my line. So I can pick a flat spot up here and a flat spot up here, straighten that out. I can do this on both sides. And then I can come through here and kind of widen these if I want to. Here's an interesting one here. I could just simply grab this, create a square that's about the same size, like this. And then I'm going to grab it, go to step and repeat. And then let's just increase the spacing on these guys. So what's that? 0.01, let's go with 0.03 maybe. 0.03, like that. Apply. Now I've got 4 squares. I'm going to group them together, move them out of the way. Delete these guys. I can put them back, color them black. Got that fixed. So you can see how quickly this can very easily turn to a usable file versus you having to sit there and redo all this stuff over and over and over again and spend time recreating a lot of this stuff. I can very easily and very quickly just come in here and start modifying this stuff. And again, this is what we want to kind of illustrate is that even if you don't get a perfect image, sometimes as long as you get yourself close enough, you can make this job a lot easier for you. Again, logos, this comes up quite a bit. So people who will bring in like, for example, like a little card with their logo on it, and you have to scan it in. that's perfect for this. Take a picture of that logo, that would work. All kinds of different things. Get in there and kind of mess with some of the settings. I would really say that when I'm doing my vectorization, the three tools that I probably use the most are going to be auto trace for pretty much any. I'm going to try it first. Typically, auto trace does such a good job, and I don't even have to mess with any of the settings really. I just leave everything default, and it does a really good job. I stick with auto trace and color trace. They're my really two go-to ones that I use. Then, if I think that the auto trace really didn't do a good enough job, or I think it could be a little bit better, I'll default myself down to enhanced corners. Most of the time, I skip past Bezier and enhanced curves, and I go right to enhanced corners, just because that gives me the control and the flexibility of moving those sliders around. And then what I can do is I can vectorize that same object 4, 5, 6 times, like real quick, and move those sliders around a little bit individually. And then I'll be able to kind of dial in right where I think that should be. And so those are my 3 ones that I use the most, and I think are probably the most useful. They give you the best chance at success when it comes to vectorizing those files. Hopefully this helps you guys out a little bit. Again, if you have any questions, I'll be available for the next 45 minutes down in the chat or in the comment section. Go ahead and hit me up with questions about this or about anything about Flexi. I would be glad to help you out. Hopefully you guys can use this and join us next month for our next Workflow Wednesday. And you guys have a great week. Thanks. Bye.